Not plural. Just one. Twin day, folks. That means let's go. Hi, everyone. My name is Will, and I'm going to be your guide through the Harambe Wildlife Reserve. Now, while we're out there, it's really important everybody stays seated at all times. Keep on hands, arms, feet, legs inside the vehicle. And also, for all my guests back there, I know it's still new. We're all still readjusting. But while we're here on the truck, I do need all of your face coverings all the way on throughout the entire safari today. Once you get off the truck, do with them what you will. But while you're here, for all my guests back there, I do need them to stay on. Now here in the Ituri Forest, animals rely on their natural camouflage, but we're starting off really strong on the right-hand side with this okapi. Now, a lot of people confuse okapis to be relatives of zebras because of those sort of party pants they wear, but they are the only known living relative of giraffes. We know that because of their long prehensile tongues, meaning that tongue works like a finger, and they use it to grab leaves off of bushes and trees. Now, of course, they don't have any fingers of their own like you and I do, but they have eyes. They get stuff stuck in those eyes. Anyone have any idea how they're going to get that with that tongue, right? Yeah, it's so long they can lick their own eyeballs. About 14 inches. Well, so up on the left-hand side, there's a beautiful black rhino way off in the back. Then we'll talk about him in just a second, but much closer to us in the water here, going to be a saddle-built stork. They stand about 5 feet with a wingspan of around 9. That's comparable to that canopy above your head. Now, off to the left back there is a black rhino, one of my all-time favorite animals. Black rhinos are actually one of the smaller rhino species. They only weigh about 3,000 pounds, and just like the okapi's tongue, their upper lips are prehensile, meaning once again they work like a finger, used for the same thing. Now, unfortunately, all 5 rhino species are being poached for their horns made of something called keratin, which some folks believe to have medicinal properties. That's just not the case. Same stuff our fingernails and hair are made from. Folks, we are going to move on from that for now. Keep in mind, we'll get back to it later. To the left-hand side and the right are those gorgeous orange antelopes called bongos, and they are critically endangered, nicknamed the ghost of the forest because they're so reclusive they are rarely seen. On the left-hand side is this greater kudu. It's one of the tallest of the African antelopes at about 55 inches just at her shoulders. Now, folks, the bongos are not the only critically endangered animal in the Ituri. A lot of them here are struggling, and a big issue they face is the mining of a mineral called coltan. It's also mined in the African savanna for use in electronics like your cameras and cell phones, and those mines result in habitat loss and pollution. They also impact the communities around them. So a great way to help animals and people is just by recycling your electronics. It's pretty easy, and it's free at many electronic stores. Now, folks, we have reached the Salty River Valley, and here in the river, we should be on the lookout for animals that prefer a more aquatic environment, such as water birds, as well as some Nile crocodiles, and if we're lucky, maybe a Nile hippo, too. Just see some hippos up ahead. We're really kicking off with a large gray of white birds, kind of peppered all up the place. The left-hand side is a pink-backed pelican who names the color of the skin on their back turns during their mating season. And hey, folks, just another quick request back there. Shh, 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 shh. Guys, I know it's exciting. I love these animals too, but we do need to try to keep volume levels to a minimum. And guys back there, please keep your face coverings all the way on too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, hippos are one of the most dangerous animals in the world to humans. A lot of those run-ins happen at night when they leave their water to graze on the ground. Travel up to 10 miles in a single night. Guys, it's going to be very, very important to stay as quiet as we can, because down the left-hand side, we don't want to bother that little baby hippo calf. Look at her. Oh, my God. Lord, she's just right over there behind Mom, in front of Mom now. Just darting all around. What a cutie. Folks, we're coming up on this bridge here. It's just a friendly reminder to remain seated. We're going to go nice and slow across this bridge. To the left-hand side, there's some Nile crocodiles that average about 16 feet in length and 500 pounds. They can be as long as a giraffe is tall. Alrighty, folks, before we continue on with the safari, I do have one more thing to say. For all of my guests back there, each and every one of you, and I know it's going to take some time to readjust, really get used to it, just reestablish that habit, but your face cover's got to stay all the way on for every single one of my guests back there that are over the age of 2 years old. It's just a courtesy to your fellow guests, of course a safety thing too, guys. I don't want to have to interrupt the safari anymore because it takes away from your fellow guests. It also takes away from myself as your driver. So guys, last time I'm going to say something for my guests back there. Just while you're here on the truck, what you do with them when you get off is 100% up to you, but while you're here, and you need to stay on. Folks, we're working our way to the Savannah. It's a much different ecosystem than anywhere we've been today. It has a higher tree canopy and some wide open spaces, and a big reason that it looks the way it does are the keystone species that call it. Well, now keystones are animals that shape and maintain the ecosystem they live in, and on our little reserve, we get the privilege of highlighting 2 different animals as keystones of this Savannah. First one to talk about is going to be giraffes. Now, I'm looking out in the plains, I don't see any yet, but we don't have to know that they're close by because the treetops sort of start around the same height, and that's no coincidence. That's because the giraffes will prune those trees. That means that they get lower down in those canopies, and over time the trees learn not to burn their leaves when the giraffes can reach them, so they start growing up higher up the stack, creating this taller and thicker canopy. Helps out smaller grazing animals like this Harkins mountain zebra coming up on the right hand side because it lets more sunlight down to the ground. Helps the grass to grow better. Gives them more food to eat. Now, Hartman's mountain zebras are the only zebras on Earth with that extra skin flap there on the bottom of their neck. It's called a dewlap, but they have that to keep cool on hot days like today. They're going to be pushing blood through their dewlaps and bringing their body temperatures back down. It's a process called thermoregulation. It needs to manage your body temperature, something all animals do. Talk about that more later on. Now, folks, coming up on the left-hand side is going to be this pack of painted dogs. Painted dogs are also known as African wild dogs, and they're a lot more than a cute face. It's one of the most successful predators in the world. Some packs have succeeded on over 80% of their hunts, about 4 times better than lions because they have great endurance and communication skills. Now, they are fascinating, but they're also critically endangered. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. Coming up here on the left-hand side are some white-bearded wildebeest. They're one of the most densely populated animals on Earth. Every year they get together in a group of about 1.5 million for the Great Migration, where they run 500 to 1,000 miles together in search of food and water. Now, folks, those painted dogs, about 100 years ago, there were nearly 500,000 of them. Today, there's only about 7,000 left. And one of the biggest issues they're facing is called population fragmentation. That means that they don't have a continuous range in the wild, but they're kind of scattered throughout the African continent, very small groups, too far apart from one another to interact with each other. That makes certain things like maintaining genetic diversity very difficult. Actually, with every new generation of painted dog pup proceed, many more issues along the lines of birth defects and other genetic problems. But there's great work going into Razan, and if you can learn more about it, come see me at the end of the safari. I'll talk to you off about it then. But I do also want to mention that a lot of those larger groups of painted dogs are right around the border of the Savannah and the Ituri forest, especially in a country called Gabon. And that's a sweet spot for that coltan mining. So really, by recycling your electronics, you'll help out so much around here too. Now, folks, on the right hand side is another white-bearded wildebeest. Giraffes don't just prune these trees, but they pollinate them as well. They are the world's largest pollinators, and they pollinate completely by accident, moving tree to tree every couple minutes, for 22 hours a day. Each time taking a face full of pollen with them. Rubs off in the canopy of every tree they go to, and that's how they pollinate. A lot of benefits for plants when they're pollinated. We'll talk about that more later on. But to the right-hand side, in that group of palm trees, are the unmistakable horns of some Ankole cattle. Ankoles have some of the largest horns on Earth. They're going to be well over 3 feet on either side, but they're very lightweight, only about 15 pounds each because they're nearly hollow inside with a honeycomb-like structure. Push blood through it just like the zebras with the dewlaps so that they can thermoregulate, manage their body temperatures. Now, folks, on the left-hand side are those Maasai giraffes. Historically, the Maasai giraffes have been found all over the African continent, but today they're only in 4 or 5 Eastern African countries, including Kenya and Tanzania, facing many issues like habitat loss from human activities. That mining contributes, as does logging and other forms of development. They're also poached pretty heavily for their pelts and meats. Now, the actual number of giraffe species is actively debated between 3 and 7, and however many there are, it doesn't matter to me, because there are fewer than 100,000 giraffes in all of Africa. That's not nearly enough. They've gone extinct from several African countries, continue to struggle now. As keystones, they're vital to the savannah, and when this area loses a major player like the giraffes, it will fall apart and may even cease to exist altogether. That's why it's so important to protect the giraffes to upset everyone else around. I'll give you all a great tool to do just that later on, but we're in elephant country now. Talk about elephants just a moment. On the left-hand side are these mandrills. They're the largest monkeys in the world. Males weigh about 100 pounds. Females are about a third the size, between 30 and 35 pounds. They're also seriously impacted by that coltan mining. On the right hand side is an African elephant. Folks, please be mindful of your volume levels back there. All these animals are very sensitive here, and we don't want to disturb any of them. It's also courtesy to your fellow guests. We go on the right hand side. Elephants are the other keystone we're going to talk about. Something they do to really solidify them into that role is they will dig drought up riverbeds out of the ground using their tusks. That actually creates a brand new watering hole by getting into the groundwater underneath during dry seasons and times of drought. It's a very strong lifeline for all animals in the savannah. Predator and prey alike use them, and it saves lives of thousands of animals every single year. Now, folks, I have talked a bit about thermoregulation, right? Managing your body temperature. It's important because all these animals feel the heat like you and I do, and they all have their own ways to cool down. Those ancoles push blood through their horns, like the zebras with their dewlaps. Does anyone back there know how we thermoregulate? By sweating, right? Yeah, we're doing it all day today. Well, elephants will flap their ears. That'll cool them down about 15 degrees, bringing a hot 90-degree day to a nice, comfortable 75-degree day for them. So you could say that they have really good built-in ear conditioning. All right, let that sink in for a second. Well, elephants are extraordinarily intelligent animals. They have great memory, and that plays a really important role in their conservation. Now, just a few years ago, there were some Kenyan farmers that were having an issue with elephants raiding their farm, so they reached out to the Disney Conservation Fund for some help, and the DCF got to work and came through in a really big way. They actually discovered that African elephants are afraid of Africanized honeybees. Now, that's pretty far-fetched, right? Elephants are massive and bees are tiny, but it's true. It's the buzzing sound and the sticking together that ends up scaring them. And there's a saying, an elephant never forgets. So their memories are so good when they go into an area and they find something that they don't like, such as those bees. They're going to remember where that was and never go back. So with that information, they put up beehive fences along the sides of those farms, and those fences worked really well. That did several things for that situation. It helps the farmers out because it saves their crops and gives them a new one of the honey that the bees are making. More crops means more money. That extra income is going to be a nice boost for the farmers. And the bees are also going to pollinate those farmers' crops. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of benefits. This is all true when giraffes are doing it, but it keep them healthier and stronger and more resistant to disease. It also happens to make any of the food they grow taste better. And of course, it helps the elephants because it keeps them away from people. And as many of us know, when humans and wildlife run into each other, that's not always the best outcome. It's going to help keep everybody nice and safe. Now on the left-hand side, of course, is this flamboyance of greater flamingos. These are the largest and lightest shade of pink out of all flamingos. They don't hatch pink. They hatch gray and black in their trademark color. Over the first couple years of their lives, even brine shrimp and other small crustaceans full of something called beta-carotene. It's the carotene in their diet that gives them their color. Folks, that carotene sounds an awful lot like keratin I talked about in those rhino horns, but those are two very different things. We're actually in white rhino territory now, and I cannot promise we'll see any, but if we do, they would be southern white rhinos. I'll talk about it in just a little bit, but first I'm going to kick it off with the northern white rhino, who we won't see anytime soon, because northern white rhinos are functionally extinct. There are only 2 of them left in the world. Now, they're both very well protected on a reserve in Kenya, and there are brilliant minds working around the clock trying to figure out how to use a southern white rhino as a surrogate mother to carry and give birth to a whole new northern white rhino calf. It's never been done before, but there is hope, and a lot of that hope does come from southern white rhinos' own conservation successes. Back in 1982, they went extinct in the country of Uganda and remained extinct there for nearly 30 years until Animal Kingdom and a few other zoos released some captive-born southern white rhinos onto a reserve out there. 2 rhinos that were born here now live on that reserve, and they are doing very well. They've even successfully reproduced in the wild. That's incredible because it's showing us that reintroduced rhinos can make a comeback. It takes a very long time, but steadily they are coming back up. Now, folks, a great way to help those giraffes or any other animal you may want to is just by getting online and doing some of your own research. I promise there's an animal out there for each and every one. It's just really going to get you going. It may even light a fire in you, become your favorite animal. And just an example, look, my favorite animals are actually rhinos. I love rhinos, and I want to encourage each and every one of you to find your rhino. Find the animal that just really does it for you. Learn everything you can about them and their conservation, and then start to spread the word. Talk to anybody who will listen. There's a rhino on the right hand side. And before long, you made a much bigger impact than you ever realized, because education is one of the most powerful tools conservationists use to help animals. You don't have to be a career conservationist to make a difference. Actually, a little antelope that we're going to see right over there, right around those rhinos. We're going to look in just a little bit. It's a great example of how anyone can help. It's called a bontebok, and bonteboks are one of the most important animals in the world to conservationists because they have an incredible success story. I'll talk about that story in just a moment, but I don't want to skip over the warthogs on the left-hand side. So they're just kind of laying, kind of right in the middle of this yard, all the way in the back. These are the largest burrowing animals on Earth. They have two sets of tusks. Their large upper ones are great for digging, and their smaller lower ones are much sharper. I'll use those for self-defense. Now, folks, watch these rhinos' ears. It's my favorite thing they do. They're going to be pointing them at us, pointing them back away. It's just them keeping an ear on things. They have very poor eyesight. They can't see us from where they are now. They can't see much more than about 10 feet in front of them, but they can hear you from about a mile away and smell you from pretty far. Two, their ears move independently from one another, and it's really fun to get to watch them wiggle them around. Folks, on the right hand side, that little brown antelope laying down with that bright white face is that bontebok I talked about just a moment ago. Gorgeous, gorgeous animal there. Now we're going to come up, try to sneak past these rhinos on the right. As you can see, white rhinos are very mild-mannered. They're very timid animals. Really easy to be close to them without them minding us. That bontebok story is going to bring us back about 100 years to South Africa. And there were just 17 bontebok left in the world. On that last herd on this farm, put up a fence around them and ended up saving the species. He got in touch with the national parks in South Africa, and they opened the Bontebok National Park. Now, thanks to the efforts of that park and that farmer, they've grown from just 17 100 years ago to almost 3,000 today. Now, that kind of comeback is unprecedented. They're not in the woods yet, but their population's still growing. We're all really eager to see where time will take. Now, 3,000 may not sound like a great number, right? Giraffes are struggling at 100,000, so why isn't 3,000 bontebok so good, right? Well, historically, they've always had a pretty small population. They thrive in a very small region of South Africa. Not totally out of the woods yet, as I mentioned, but it's still very, very good for them. On the left-hand side, those little Nigerian dwarf goats, too much like that bontebok, are a great example of how proper land and resource management can benefit an ecosystem. They are so compact that they have a minimal impact here in the Magadi Blend and still produce great goat products that can be used to feed villagers here in Harambe or be sold to make some money for the community here. Bontebok really is just so important because the story lends hope, and in conservation work it's really easy to feel discouraged. You get something like them and you hold on pretty tightly. They lend hope to many of the animals we've just seen and talked about, like the bongos and the painted dogs, as well as the giraffes and of course the rhinos and so many more of these animals. That's why a lot of them are here as sort of ambassadors for their species, so we all get to go around and enjoy looking at them together, while myself and my fellow guides get the privilege of taking you all on these adventures to talk to you, not just about these animals, but also the issues they face and ways everybody can help. Now, here in Harambe, our head warden does like to say, which you see with your eyes, you value with your heart. I get to spend all day with these animals. In case you can't tell, they mean a lot to me, so I hope you guys are going to bring some of that home with you. And if you are, and you'd like to get involved and help out, the easiest way to do that is going to be just by making a donation to the Disney Conservation Fund. Now, there's no pressure to do that at all, but if you'd like to, you can at any merchandise location in the village. Disney will match that dollar for dollar and put 100% of proceeds to conservation initiatives. Now, if today's not the day for you to do that, Hakuna Matata, no worries. There's no pressure to begin with. We talked about other great ways to help these animals, and there are so many more. Now, folks, just to be completely transparent with you, we are sitting in a little bit of a giraffic jam as we make our way back towards the village, but I said, guys, come on, I really stuck my neck out for that one. Oh, okay. But, as my grandmother used to say, we're not just sitting in traffic, we are also traffic, so we'll get to keep going as space clears up ahead, whenever that may be. if y'all have come up with any questions at all, feel free to see me at the end. I probably answer most of them. I do know a thing or two, but if for some reason I can't, I'll let you know that I can, and then I'll point you in the direction of someone or somewhere who can.